Should my dyslexic child be graded on spelling tests? You're probably expecting me to say, as a dyslexia therapist, no. Actually, my answer is yes and no. I think it completely depends on what the spelling test is actually measuring. So as a certified academic language therapist and a mom of children with dyslexia, this is how I think about spelling tests. If the spelling test is asking a child to apply a spelling pattern that has been explicitly taught, then yes, I absolutely think it should count. For example, let's say the teacher has spent the week teaching that when you hear the long A sound in the beginning or the middle of a word, AI is typically used and AY is typically used if they hear it at the end of the word. So if that's the case, the spelling test includes words like rain, train, play, and stay. So grade that. Why? Because the student isn't memorizing 20 random words. They're applying a rule that they've been explicitly taught, hopefully over and over and over. That's what we want. And yes, in a perfect world, it is actually the dyslexia specialist who is giving them that test. And that is the rule that she or he has been explicitly teaching in the lesson in a multisensory way all week. But the same is true for things like the doubling rule, silent E, open and closed syllables, suffixes, prefixes, or any spelling pattern that has been directly taught. That's learning, that's application. And yes, I think that can be graded. But if the spelling test is simply a list of 20 unrelated words that don't follow a teachable pattern, then my answer is no. And that's the majority of what I see out there. Because now we're not measuring whether the child understands and can apply the spelling rule in that situation. We're measuring how well they can memorize. And those are two completely different skills. I'll give you an example from my own family. One of my children had weekly spelling tests that were half rule-based words and half irregular sight words. And the first half made perfect sense because he could apply the phonics rule from that week. But the second half, there wasn't a rule to apply. Those words simply had to be memorized, and he was bombing spelling tests because of that. So I asked for an accommodation. I asked that my child would be graded on the first half of the spelling test, just like every other student, because those words measured whether or not he could apply what had been taught. But those sight words, I asked that they demonstrate recognition instead of spelling. So he still had to know the words. He still had to be able to read them instantly, but he did not have to spell them. He was no longer required to spell those from memory. Now, that accommodation completely changed the purpose of the assessment. Instead of measuring my child's struggle area, it measured what he actually knew. So the next time someone asks, should my dyslexic child be graded on spelling tests? My answer is, if the test measures application of an explicitly taught spelling pattern, yes. If it measures memorization of unpredictable words, then no. That's not lowering expectations. That's making sure the assessment measures the intended skill, not the learning difference. So is this test measuring application or memorization? Because that answer should determine how it's graded.